Hey everyone, Ed40 here with another Hardcore Nuzlocke for you, this time in Pokémon Platinum. And I'm banning half the Pokédex again. That means I'm only using half the Pokémon introduced in Gen 4, minus starters, legendaries, and pseudo-legendaries. This gives me a total of 20 evolutionary lines. But because of how weird Gen 4 is, 7 of these lines have Pokémon from another generation, which I won't be able to use. We'll get there when we get there, but I'm excited for this run. These are the rules in short. You can only catch the first viable encounter on each route, there are no duplicate encounters, if a Pokemon faints, they're dead, there are no items in battle outside of held items, and there are level caps equal to each gym leader or champion's ace. Now let's start the show! Now, I'm kinda surprised that I haven't made a Pokemon Platinum Nuzlocke yet. Before last year, I'd have said that it was my favorite mainline Pokemon game ever. Outside of being a little slow in performance, it's a perfectly made Pokemon game. I feel like this is one of the only games in the series that intuitively understands pacing. In almost every way, it's the best game in its region. Diamond and Pearl aren't as hard or diverse, and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, while the fastest games in Sinnoh, are also the laziest and my least favorite games in the series. The Sinnoh games were the first fully new ones to come out after I got into Pokemon, and I was so hyped to get them. I was pretty instantly in awe too. The region was just beautiful, and the gameplay was challenging, but a blast, as every attack looked so much cooler than in Fire Red or Emerald. But it also marked a big shift in my relationship with the series. My friends were quickly losing interest in Pokemon, and while most of us enjoyed Diamond and Pearl, I was pretty much the only one who stuck around until Platinum. And I think, in a certain sense, it makes sense why. One of the few flaws the Sinnoh games had was bad Pokemon design, all things considered. There are just too many Pokemon who looked kinda dorky or had too much going on. It wasn't really cool to kids in the same way that the first 3 gens were. And I really liked the games, but a lot of the mystique outside of them had faded for me, and even more for my friends. There's this very real sense of the people around me outgrowing Pokemon, so I felt like I needed to too. I didn't know it at the time, but Platinum would be my last game for a while to come. About 8 months after Platinum came out, I sold all my games to my friend's brother and officially quit out of the series. But back to the game. I gave my rival Turtwig. Now, I think it's fair to say that though this is a relatively weak design generation, it's probably got the best starters of any region. Everyone has great typing, and they're all so powerful. Turtwig's my favorite, but who do you usually pick? Let me know in the comments. But, we lose this battle, so that's attempt 1 over. Curse you, ego! Actually, attempt 2 too, because my trainer ID is a bad one for this run. I try again in attempt 3, and this time, with better use of Growl, I get the win. And after a stern talking to by Professor Rowan, and a meeting with the guy mumbling to himself at a lake, I can finally get my real starter. At Lake Verity, I can catch a Bidoof I named Remy. She's got a plus speed, minus special defense, naive nature, which isn't bad. She also has Unaware, so I'm pretty happy here. And then, after I make it to Jubilife City, I can go all the way up to Route 204 and catch a Bidoof I named Garden. She's got an amazing plus speed, minus attack, timid nature, and I am so excited to use her. Finally, I can wait until night and go back to Route 201, where I find and catch a Kricketune with an amazing plus attack, minus special attack, adamant nature I named Giada. And that's not all. At level 10, she evolves into Kricketune. We're really cooking now. But our first critic awaits. I battle my rival for the first time with run-approved Pokemon. This is a fight I always forget about. It's not that hard because none of his team can hit for super effective damage yet, but if you've only got one Pokemon, it can get a little scary thanks to how much his Pokemon can reduce the damage you do. I'm not in that position, so this fight isn't that hard. I just lead with Giada and then bide until Starly faints. He got a bunch of Growls in though, so I decide to switch to Garden as Turtwig comes out. Even though she doesn't have a move that can hit for even neutral damage, I decide to just spam Growth until an attack activates Poison Point. This only takes 3 turns. Once that happens, I just absorb to get most of Garden's health back. It actually crits too, so now Turtwig's sitting pretty at half HP. I decide to swap back into Giada to see how a Fury Cutter spam would go, but unfortunately Tackle gets rid of a third of her remaining HP, so it's probably better to just switch. I go into Remy and just start growling away. At this point, poison damage is really piling up, so I don't even need an attack to win. He's gonna get a lot harder though. Honestly, even as I think he's a kinda annoying character, the Gen 4 rival might be the toughest of the series. His team just gets so well balanced and powerful by the end. And unlike, say, the Gen 1 rival, His Pokemon have the movesets to cause some serious harm too. After some training, it's time to face Rourke. And one thing I love about Platinum is that while this is the first set of Pokemon games, in my opinion at least, to really give you a ton of type diversity before the first gym, it's really needed. Rourke might be the hardest first gym leader of the series. While Brock's a wall, Rourke is basically Brock with good moves plus a Cranidos, who can just tear through your team, even if you match up well against him. Thankfully, I've got Garden. I lead with her against Geodude, and a single Mega Drain gets rid of him, leveling her up to 15. One more gets rid of the Onix that follows. And thanks to just a little bit of speed investment, she can outspeed Cranidos to hit Mega Drain to a third as he just uses Leer. She would have speed tied with him otherwise in my calcs, but now Rourke heals, so a second Mega Drain leaves him on a sliver, but a final one cleanly takes Cranidos out for the win without taking a single point of damage. Garden's a beast. Unfortunately though, we have to say goodbye to her for a while now, because I decide to evolve her into a Roselia at level 16. But he just won't learn any new moves, and isn't that helpful into Gardenia, so it made sense to evolve here. But this means that because Roselia is not from this generation, she can't be used until I get a shiny stone, which is quite a ways away. So I guess we're just down to 2 Pokemon now. But shortly after, Remy evolves into a Bibarel for some much needed support. So I guess my team's technically fully evolved now, in what must be record time. And after fighting a couple Team Galactic grunts, one of the best teams, by the way, especially after having just played through Kalos, it's wild how much better Sinnoh does almost the exact same storyline compared to Team Flare. But anyways, I can now get another encounter. Because of the randomization process, I only have one eligible Honey Tree Pokemon, Ambipom. Not the most common encounter, but certainly not the rarest. As a result, I slather some honey on the Floaroma Meadow Tree and wait, checking in every day or so. In the meantime, I get to work liberating the Valley Windworks. The grunts go down easy, but Mars is a real challenge. Her Purugly is so strong, and she can be a real Nuzlocke thorn, so I need a bit of a plan here. I think I have one, but I feel like every single Nuzlocke I do, I always end up getting a little bit ahead of myself in at least one battle, and that ends up happening here. I meant to switch my team order around, but instead Giada leads. She can't even hit Zubat for neutral damage, so that's not gonna work. I swap into Remy, who takes a Toxic with a Pecha Berry that's supposed to activate a little later. But instead, she now has to start Rollout, but misses, meaning Zubat can Toxic again. At least next turn, Rollout lands before a second one gets the KO, but Remy's at half health as Purugly comes in. Fake Out brings her to a third, and then Toxic leaves her at under a quarter. At least this means I have control over her though, and so now I can switch back into Giada, who takes a Scratch that does a third. That's a bit more than I thought it'd do, honestly, but Rock Smash, which I just taught her, does around 40% and gets the defense drop. Granted, another Scratch does take her below half health, but an Oranberry brings her right back up. And now, one more Rock Smash sends Purugly down, and Mars flying. This girl and her dad say something about a balloon Pokemon who comes on Fridays. Remember that. But now, I can explore. And there's a giant clutter of Pokemon in the couple routes I have access to, so I'm just gonna wait until I can guarantee my encounter on Route 205, and just rappel up to Eterna Forest. Here, I can finally get a replacement for Garden. But there's some catches. I need to team up with Cheryl to go through this route. This is really helpful for battling, and this trainer team up is a kinda cute touch I wish the series returned to more. But it's awful for catching Pokemon. Her Chansey knows Egg Bomb, which can really just KO any Pokemon I find. Thankfully, we run into 2 Bunearys, lessening my fear a little bit, so after both fall to the red, I have Remy just Defense Curl and let Chansey choose which one I catch. And Buneary doesn't break out of the Great Ball, so I catch her and name her Rachel. Now, the other snag here is that while the Buneary line, which I admittedly haven't used much, is pretty good by reputation at least, Buneary can either have Runaway, a meh but neutral ability, or Klutz, one of the worst abilities in the series. Thankfully, Rachel has Runaway, guaranteeing Cute Charm when she evolves, but she has a horrible minus attack plus special attack modest nature. That could cause some problems, but in the meantime, I've got a great new addition to my team. And when I get to Eterna City, aside from picking up the EXP share for Garden so training her later isn't the worst, I can get yet another encounter. I was gonna get this one later, but grinding out friendship with Rachel is taking much longer than I thought. But in this house, I pick up the Explorer Kit, and now I can go underground and after an hour of searching, find an armor fossil, which I take back to Orberg and revive into a Shieldon and in Bourdain. His plus special attack minus special defense rash nature is kinda bad, but getting a bulky steel type early on is gonna make my life a lot easier. I think I've said this before, but through Gen 6, I think fossil Pokemon get better each generation. And the Shieldon line, while it isn't amazing, has always kinda stuck with me. Probably my favorite experience I've ever had in Pokemon was playing a fan game where I had to take on a Mega Rayquaza with almost my entire team fainted. And then, I realized my surviving Bastiodon totally walled them. The offensively weakest fossil took down probably the strongest Pokemon in the series, without even breaking a sweat. I hope Bourdain can reach that level of greatness too. Finally, Garden evolves into a Lopunny, giving me an amazing, fast fighter for this early in the game. Now, I'm just waiting around though, and after another day, it's Friday, so that means I can get a special encounter. At the Valley Windworks, Drifblim shows up, where I catch him and name him Beard. He's got a decent plus special defense minus speed sassy nature, but he's gonna be perfect for Gardenia. And because I haven't been able to get an Ambipom yet, I think we're ready to take her on. Now, Gardenia, in my opinion, is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, gym leaders ever. Having a mostly evolved team means that her Pokemon can hit hard and have more bulk to them than you'd expect at this point in the game. I still remember my first time playing Diamond and just getting destroyed by her over and over again at my friend's house, as we tried to figure out how to possibly beat her. The one nice thing though is that as long as you have good resisted coverage, ideally on the special side, you should be able to make it through with only a little bit of fear. That's why I lead Beard. Although Gardenia's Turtwig sets up Reflect, 2 Gusts get the job done outright. Charm comes in now though, and Gust isn't quite doing half. That means I'm gonna need to do some chip with Payback. Except, this sad little plant manages to Leech Seed my spooky balloon. I switched to Giada to get rid of Leech Seed as Reflect ends. But this probably wasn't the best call because now a Magical Leaf takes Beard under half when I swap back. I get some recovery with an attached Oranberry, but that's all lost after another Magical Leaf. At least Gust KOs. This just leaves Roserade, and I think Beard should be able to survive even a crit Magical Leaf, so I use Gust to do a third. But while it looks like I could probably tank another non-critical Magical Leaf, I think it's time to switch now. I go back into Giada, who's well above half after a Magical Leaf instead. But she misses Sing. Her Oranberry recovers some health before she finally puts Roserade to sleep with her soulful tunes. But one thing I'm learning is that this is not enough. While Giada can get some recovery with a critical Leech Life, she's not quite in a position to rack up some serious damage here. So after 2 turns of sleep and Roserade losing her Citrus Berry, I decide it's time to switch so I don't bait any potions. And here, I swap into Rachel as Roserade stays asleep. Not that it mattered, but this lets me freely KO with a stab close to max powered return for the win. And with access to Cut, it's time for round 2 with Team Galactic. But first, there's someone I need to get. I can now head back into Eterna Forest and go into Old Chateau. In the TV at night, there's a Rotom who I can catch and name Ramsey. They've got a kinda awful plus defense minus speed relax nature and single digit IVs for everything but attack and speed. But they're coming on the team in the place of Garden for now. Now, if Mars is a killer in Nuzlockes, Jupiter is a Nuzlocke ender. Skuntank is probably the single strongest Pokemon you could have fought at this point in the run. And with access to Stab Night Slash and status and stat lowering moves, I'll need to be really careful here to pull out a win. That's why I lead Giada. With a Sing, Zubat falls asleep, and I can switch in Remy. Because Zubat has Giga Drain, I don't want to risk an early wake up, so I don't set up Defense Curl and just use Rollout. The first hit does under half, but Zubat stays asleep, letting the second hit cleanly get the kill. The third one does under half on Skuntank as she uses Screech, making me worried that she'd be able to survive another hit and KO with Night Slash, but my fears are assuaged as a 4th rollout gets the job done. If anything went south, I had Bourdain and Rachel in the back to clean up Skuntank, but I'm glad it didn't come to that. And now, this part of the region's opened up a lot, letting me get a few things. First, in Wayward Cave, I find and catch a Bronzor I name Puck. Puck has a kinda awful minus special attack plus speed jolly nature, but they're going on the team in the place of Giada, who doesn't really match up great anywhere for the rest of the game. When I was a kid, Bronzong seemed like the strongest Pokemon, because you couldn't really touch them unless you had good fire moves, which given fire type's notorious rarity in these games, was pretty hard to come by. Now, I could have gotten Puck earlier, but then I wouldn't have been able to guarantee my Mount Coronet encounter, which I can do now by secondly going back up to Route 211 and catching a Chingling I named Barry. So, with those 2 Pokemon in hand, or rather, one in hand and one in the PC, I can head to Mount Coronet, where I have a 5% chance of encountering a Nosepass I catch and name Julia. And with a rare candy, she evolves into a Probopass. I put her on the team over Bourdain for now, at least. Then, in Hearthome City, I meet Bebe, who gives me a free Eevee. Now, I have 2 Sinnoh options for what I can evolve Bayless the Eevee into, but I'm gonna save that for later. Finally, I now have 3 more honey trees to hunt for Ambipom, which pays off because after another day of searching, I found one just north of Orberg City, catch her, and name her Dean. Dean is a kind of bad Ambipom. She's got a special attack boosting mild nature and an attack IV of just 1. And while Technician is going to be the better of her possible abilities when she evolves, it's just not quite useful enough given her moveset to totally work. In Hearthome City, I can go into Amity Square, where the only Pokemon I have to walk with is Beard. So I do that to get the Spooky Plate, which will be dearly needed soon. This place is always so wild to me. I have no idea why so few Pokemon can even make it in. It might be the single most esoteric urban design choice I've ever seen. Now, I'm a little worried for Fantina's battle. I don't really have a lot of moves that hit Ghosts super effectively outside of Beard, but here's the thing about that. While training up in the gym, Beard ends up fighting a Drifblim, and after an Astonish, Drifblim responds with a payback, killing an already damaged Beard. That's brutal. Bourdain is back on the team, but I've got to teach him Rock Tomb so he can even hope to touch Fantina's ghost types. After a day of training and planning, I think I've developed a strategy, but we'll have to see how it goes. Nothing's guaranteed, to say the least. I lead Puck, who outspeeds to put Duskull to sleep. Then, I can just swap into Ramsey, who outspeeds to do over half with the Shockwave. Nice. But then, Duskull wakes up and hits a Shadow Sneak! Actually, that's fine. One more Shockwave KOs. But then, Fantina sends in Miss Mages, and I hadn't planned for that. You can see my brain breaking for a second as I try to figure out what to do. Finally, I realize what the play is. I had a backup option for this fight, but I wasn't really sure how to use it until now. I swap into Rachel on a totally ineffective Shadow Ball. Now, Rachel doesn't have any moves that can hit Ghosts. On their own, that is. I kept Foresight on her moveset for this very reason. With it set up, all I have to do is just risk Confusion, which unfortunately happens. And I need to risk her hurting herself. But I click Return, it hits, and KOs! Wow! That crit was needed. I didn't realize it until later, but that return would have only done half without it. Rachel would have been fine if it hadn't crit, but this risks so much less Confusion damage, and now Fantina's scariest threat is gone. Hunter comes in last, and here I can just take the Sucker Punch turn to swap back into Puck, who puts Hunter to sleep after a second Sucker Punch, and then KOs with 2 extra sensories for the win. That went a little better than I expected, to say the least. And after a rival battle that might actually be the single easiest of the run, the level cap is high enough for me to evolve Bayless the Eevee. Now, I have roughly even need for Leafeon and Glaceon, so I just decide to get Leafeon now by leveling Bayless up in Eterna Forest. He's now going on the team in the place of Bourdain, at least after Bourdain evolves. And following that, Dean reaches level 32 and learns Double Hit, meaning she's finally usable too. I don't really bring her on the team though, because I've got the Maylene fight next. And I've already got a pretty big weakness to fighting, so I'll leave her be for now. Instead, I lead Bayless, who does about a third to Meditite with Bite, but no flinch means she can connect with Rock Tomb to drop Bayless's speed. After another round, Meditite can outspeed now, going for a Drain Punch, but Bayless manages to tank it and goes for a final Bite to KO, bringing in Lucario. Bayless isn't staying in here though, and I actually have almost the perfect counter. Ramsey is fully immune to both ground and fighting moves, meaning Lucario can only attack with a resisted Metal Claw. They come in on a Drain Punch, and then, after a Metal Claw does more damage than I'd like, I confuse him. Though this was actually a somewhat useless play, because in between my spamming Shockwaves the next couple turns, Lucario nonetheless hits Metal Claw, and then breaks out of confusion entirely to send Ramsey below half, thankfully saved by their Oranberry. While Shockwave's taken Lucario to a little above half, I'm probably not going to be able to outpace him at this rate, especially if Maylene heals. I have a couple contingency plans, but nothing I'm a particularly big fan of. As a result, I try and stay in and get some more damage off with a Shockwave, which crits! I guess that solves my problems. I would have just switched to Remy for a Yawn next turn otherwise, But that felt really risky considering her weakness to fighting. But with Lucario out, Machoke is in, so I can just go to Puck, who takes a Rock Tomb easily, and then 2 Mind Plate boosted extra sensories get the job done, giving me a cleaner than I expected 4th badge. And now, I get to catch a bunch of Pokemon. First, in Rune Maniac Cave, I catch a Hippopotas I named Fury, who even with his bad modest nature, I'm gonna bring onto the team. Then, after Puck evolves into a Bronzong, I run south, rappelling through Route 213 to get to Route 212, where I find and catch a Weasel I named Flay. Flay's got a very mixed, plus special attack minus speed quiet nature, but he's a great find I'm really excited about, going on the team in the place of Remy. And this opens up my final puzzle of the run. See, if I wanted to maximize my encounters, then the only place I could catch Pachirisu was Route 205, where Weasel also was. So in order to ensure that I didn't catch one there, I had to skip Route 205 and catch Weasel first. But catching one earlier meant giving up Chatot until later, which isn't the worst because I'm probably never going to use them this run, even though I love Chatot. But to get every Pokemon I can, I had to operate this way. And now I can work backwards, catching a Chatot I named Oliver on Route 213. Then, I fly back to Floroma and go to Route 205 where I catch a Pachirisu I named Irvine. If anything happens to Ramsey, he's going to be the first addition to the team. After Flay quickly evolves and Fury a little less quickly evolves, it's time to take on Crasher Wake. Going through one of my favorite gym designs of all time, I'm ready to face him down. I lead Ramsey. Gyarados' Intimidate doesn't really do much against a special attacker, and with a single Shockwave, he's down and Wake brings Floatzel in? I wasn't expecting that, but I guess maybe the AI was considering that Quagsire can't hit ground moves? I don't really know. But I decide to risk a crunch and get a Shockwave in. The Floatzel outspeeds to bring Ramsey to a 3rd. Okay, maybe a bad play, but Shockwave brings Floatzel under half in return. So now, especially because Floatzel doesn't have Pursuit, I can swap into my other Pokemon strong against water, Bayless, without any extra effects, as Razor Leaf connects for the KO. And with Shell Bell recovery, Bayless is sitting pretty in the green as Quagsire comes in. And this should be easy, as Quagsire is doubly weak to grass, but he survives on a sliver to hit Yawn. If that wasn't a range, then this fight could get annoying fast. Wake heals, Razor Leaf connects, and kills. Phew. Bayless's minus attack nature just isn't doing my heart any favors here. But that's Wake down. He's always been one of my favorite leaders in the series, so I'm glad he could put up a bit of a fight here. I love the weird obsession my rival has with Wake too. He looks so uncomfortable with it, it's great. After an underwhelming battle against Cyrus, it's time for a less underwhelming battle against my rival. This is when he starts to get really tough, with a new Heracross and a fully evolved team. I lead Flay, and Ice Fang doesn't even do half. That was because of Intimidate, but it's still not a good sign. Takedown brings Flay under half, meaning I'd need Ice Fang to crit in order to keep him alive next turn. I decide to swap him out for Ramsey on a clean takedown, and then Ramsey KOs with Shockwave. My rival sends out Torterra next, so I decide to go into Puck, but they immediately get Leech Seeded. Actually, why not go into Bayless? That way, I'm immune to Leech Seed. I do that, and even though he comes in on a Bite, Bayless can slowly outpace Torterra for damage with a combination of Bite and Razor Leaf, thanks to his Shell Bell. After many turns, Torterra falls, bringing in Rapidash. Here, I decide to switch to Fury on a takedown. With a couple crunches, Rapidash is down and Floatzel is in. I don't have any super great answers here, so I just decide to go into Puck again. But Aqua Jet's doing more damage than I'd like. While 2 extra sensories get the job done, Puck's now at a little over half health, and Heracross is a big threat. He outspeeds and uses Night Slash, which does a little under half of Puck's remaining health, as Puck uses extra sensory. Which crits! Bye-bye Heracross! That was so lucky though. I've been getting a lot of crits this run. I think I could have planned out of that situation if we didn't get one, but it might have been dicey, so I'm pleasantly surprised. But Barry's gonna be a threat going forward. At least now we get a new Pokemon to take him on with. By going through Iron Island and taking on Team Galactic, I get an egg. And in that egg is a Riolu I named Brown, who after some friendship grinding, quickly evolves into a Lucario. His adamant nature could also be great, but he's not seeing any use against Byron. In fact, only one Pokemon even needs to. Byron's one of the easier gym leaders in the series, and a good ground type can deal with him cleanly. And it just so happens that I have one of those. Fury comes in, and Earthquake quickly gets rid of Magneton. Steelix probably isn't dropping to a single Earthquake. I try anyways, but he unfortunately survives just under half and responds with an Earthquake of his own. But that does even less than I was expecting. One more Earthquake takes him out and brings Bastiodon in. Even though he's doubly weak to an Earthquake, I'm worried about Metal Burst if he survives, so I kinda overcomplicate things for myself. I yawn first, but he sets up Iron Defense in the process. Not wanting to get hit by Metal Burst on an Earthquake, I decide to go for Crunch and hope for a defense drop. But no luck. My instinct was right though, as he responds with a now weak Metal Burst before passing out. So let's see how much Earthquake actually does now after all that. And I probably could have just used it in the first place, but oh well. Bastiodon's Citrus Berry activates, so I try again, and while he doesn't wake up, his health is in healing range. So another Earthquake does half after Byron fully heals him. If Earthquake kills, we're golden. If not, I'm about to lose Fury. I click it, and the 6th badge is ours! Now there's a long sequence of plot involving me and some Team Galactic admins, and while I've always loved revisiting the Sinnoh Lakes, these battles were pretty easy. My team easily covers all of Saturn and Mars's Pokemon, meaning I could just switch around for favorable matchups without much sweat. And now it's time to go north to face Candace, but before that, I get a couple new Pokemon. On Route 216, I catch a Snover named Bibarel, and on Route 217, I catch a Snorunt named Ree, who I immediately evolve into a Froslass. Despite having the worst nature and bold though, Bibarel's actually going to be the one going on the team in the place of Bayless. Going forward, Ice coverage is just going to be very useful, especially against Cynthia, but Bayless is on deck in case anything happens to Bibarel. And while I'm training up Bibarel, who evolves into a Burly Abomasnow, I decide to make another switch. Psychic types aren't amazing in this game, so I'm gonna put Julia on my team instead of Puck. I just think she'll be really fun, especially against Candace. Though I actually lead with Brown. He takes a weak Aerial Ace before quickly getting rid of Sneasel with a Fist Plate boosted Aura Sphere. I love all these plates. They really enhance the game's lore, you know? Piloswine is out next, and I don't want her to hit Brown with an Earthquake, so I jump maybe a little too far ahead in my plan by mistake and go into Flay. This leads to Earthquake doing over half, so not the right call. I should have pivoted through Ramsey, but now I need Surf to KO. Piloswine's health goes down, and she faints. I love a special attack boosting nature. But this brings out Abomasnow, and Flay can't stay in here. I swap out to Bibarel, expecting a Woodhammer, so imagine my surprise when Abomasnow went for Focus Blast instead! Thankfully, she tanks it on okay-ish health, and I can pivot into Ramsey, who's immune. But this means I have to figure out who to go into next. Because Abomasnow won't use Focus Blast on a Ghost type, I think I can swap back to Brown, so I go into him on a weak Avalanche. Perfect. And with one close combat, he's down and it's just Froslass left. But she's scary. Especially because of Snowcloak, and a guaranteed Blizzard. Brown doesn't have a great way to KO her either, so it's Julia's time to shine. I bring her in as Froslass goes for a double team. Awful. Well, my first priority is setting up Sandstorm to get rid of Snowcloak as Froslass goes for double team again. I guess either way I'm dealing with evasion strategies, huh? And by the time I finally attack, Froslass is up 3 stages in evasiveness. This begins a back and forth. I keep trying and failing to use Rock Slide as Froslass keeps setting up double team, occasionally getting some resisted chip in with Shadow Balls, the first of which gets a special defense drop. I was using Sandstorm to get rid of the hail before, but now it's essential for preserving Julia's special defense. But I'm not too worried here because Julia has rest, so she can take hits for a while before she needs to heal. And finally, after several turns of misses, Rock Slide connects to KO Froslass for the win. Julia's a great tank, and I'm glad she's on the squad. This lets me use Rock Climb to see my rival get his butt kicked. Even though it's always a pleasure to see, it starts off a long series of boss fights that drags in the way that the evil team sequence of a Pokemon game almost always does. I really wish they'd spaced all these boss fights out a little bit more. But now, after a long trek and a tough fight with Cyrus, I have a showdown at Spear Pillar against Mars and Jupiter. This fight's always brutal, so I'm really glad to have my rival fighting alongside me, despite the fact that he can be, shall we say, a little iffy. With Julia as a lead, I might really need his help. I paralyze one of the Bronzors as my rival's Munchlax body slams the same one for a waste of a turn. Already not the best start. Both Bronzors just set up screens though, and next turn I can paralyze the other one too. One Bronzor confuses Munchlax, who hits himself. We can't win them all, champ, but that's okay. Now that Julia's set up status, all we do is just Rock Slide to roll for a flinch as Munchlax hurts himself again. This is getting kinda annoying. Thankfully, my rival realizes he's not pulling his weight, and he swaps to Rapidash on a couple Gyro Balls that do more than I thought they would. But now, Barry takes over as a Fire Blast gets rid of Jupiter's Bronzor before Light Screen expires. Next turn, Rapidash gets rid of Mars's too. And now that both Bronzors are out, Julia can start putting a little more work in, nearly KOing Jupiter's Golbat with a Rock Slide. Rapidash cleans that one up next turn as Julia Rock Slides Mars's Perugly. Unfortunately, Rapidash has just taken too much damage at this point though, and Perugly outspeeds to take him out with an Aerial Ace. He's gone, but not forgotten, as his death allows Julia to take a Poison Jab she's immune to, before taking Perugly under half. And now, my rival brings out Heracross. Always a pleasure, and even though Perugly's Aerial Ace instantly takes him to the red, a close combat gets a KO on Perugly, leveling Julia up. Skuntank uses Flamethrower on Julia though to get a ton of damage in before Rock Slide takes her to half. Mars sends her Golbat in now, who outspeeds to KO Heracross with Air Cutter. And combined with another Flamethrower from Skuntank, Julia's down to just a third health. I've gotta switch, so I go into Fury as the Floatzel my rival sends in misses Iron Tail, and then gets confused. At least Flamethrower doesn't do much on Fury, because right after that, Floatzel hurts himself and gets poisoned. Finally, an Ice Fang gets the drop on Golbat, leaving just Skuntank. And here, Floatzel hurts himself again before Skuntank takes him out. Though that's all for nothing as an Earthquake KOs her for the win. Better than I expected for Barry, I guess, but his Pokemon were the epitome of all or nothing. And with Jupiter and Mars defeated, Cyrus unleashes Dialga and Palkia onto the world, only to be ambushed by Giratina. This was so sick as a kid. Giratina just showing up and snatching Cyrus away is equal parts exciting and horrifying. But this just means we have to trek all the way through the Distortion World in order to fight Cyrus. I always get lost when I do this, even as an adult, so getting to him takes some time. But once I'm there, I'm ready to fight. I lead Brown, and close combat absolutely tears through Houndoom before Gyarados comes in. I swap into Ramsey on an Earthquake, a perfect switch. Then I KO him with Shockwave next turn. Or well, I would, except he survives in the yellow, hits a Waterfall to do over half, and then Cyrus heals. Thankfully, 2 more Shockwaves do the job without any more damage, but now, with Weavile in, I've gotta switch, and I go back to Brown on an Ice Punch. After a second brings him just above half, an Aura Sphere cleanly KOs. Honchkro's out now, so I go into Flay as he Drill Packs to do way over half. I should have just swapped into Julia, which I remedied by doing now. Honchkrow goes for a Heat Wave, which actually burns, but even still, Rock Slide crits to do over half. And now I can just sleep off the burn after taking another Heat Wave. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as I'd have liked because another Heat Wave crit, meaning that Julia wakes up at 19 HP and I've gotta rest again. This time though, no crits, and Julia can finally wake up and Rock Slide Honchkrow away, leveling up Brown. Crobat's all that's left now, but Julia resists all his attacks. So after an Air Slash, I can just rest up, and despite Crobat giving me some problems with flinches and confusion, he can't do nearly enough harm to make this fight at all threatening. After many turns, a couple Rock Slides connect to take him down for the win. And with that, I just Master Ball Giratina, hop out the Distortion World, and mosey on over to Sunyshore City with my team. Now, I always loved the idea of a gym leader so good at what he does that he's just too bored to keep going. But unfortunately, we can't give Volkner an interesting battle. That's because Fury with the Shell Bell can cleanly one-shot his team outright. And thanks to some luck, Jolteon and Raichu miss their attacks, meaning he gets to Electivire on full health. While Fire Punch could cause some problems if it burned, it doesn't, and Earthquake KOs. And because Fury's taken under 1/10 of damage, I decide to keep him in and just attack Luxray, who has the one super effective move against him this whole fight. Ice Fang takes him to just above half, but no flinch or freeze means that this is one of the cleanest fights I've had. And honestly, with Julia and Brown in the back, this was never a big concern. This lets me swing on over to the League. Though I can actually catch my final Pokemon first. On Route 223, I find a Mantyke I named Nusrat. I'm not using her, but I've been on a big salt, fat, acid, heat kick recently, and I thought it'd be nice to give homage. I think it's worth returning to my relationship with Pokemon Platinum just for some closure. About a year and a half after I quit the series, I started feeling really nostalgic for Pokemon. I missed all my team building and battling, and I especially missed Platinum. So I found myself at a GameStop one day and saw a copy there, and decided I needed to have it again. After I picked it up, I basically never put the series down again. Pokemon at its best is fun, charming, exciting, and it's just so interesting to see how your teams grow and change with you over the course of your journey. And Platinum's maybe the best game to let you savor every moment of that experience. So even though it's when I fell out of the series, it's also what brought me back in. And now I'm kinda trapped here as a fan for life. I guess there are worse places to be at least. Anyways, it's time to fight my rival at the League. And this might be the single hardest rival fight in the series. His team is hard-hitting and diverse, with tons of coverage against my squad. Let's see how this goes! I lead Ramsey and quickly pick off his Staraptor. This brings Torterra in, so I switch to Bibarel on a Leaf Storm, and then outspeed for an Icicle Plate boosted Blizzard KO, bringing in Heracross. He's the single hardest part of this fight, with super effective moves against my whole team. So I've gotta tread carefully. That's why I swap into my bulkiest Pokemon who isn't weak to him in Fieri. He comes in on a close combat, which does around 40%. This means that Fieri is dead to a crit, but I don't really have much choice here. I set up a yawn as he takes another, and no crit. Phew. But now I've gotta switch. If he's going for close combats, my best bet seems like it's gonna be Ramsey, so I go into them safely as Heracross falls asleep. Next, I set up Confusion for an added layer of protection. With that, it's time to KO. And thanks to Heracross willingly having his special defense through close combat, a Discharge gets rid of him outright. But this brings in Floatzel. While this looks like a great matchup on paper, the big problem is that Floatzel can outspeed and potentially even KO with Crunch. I need to switch, so I go into Bibarel thinking she can take Floatzel on with a Giga Drain, but Floatzel gets a defense drop with Crunch, so this probably won't work. I decide to swap in Flay for a Floatzel on Floatzel battle. But in retrospect, the way I did it probably wasn't the best. I went through Ramsey, thinking about the Brick Break that was coming, and not thinking about the fact that the Crunch coming after risks a defense drop. And this was a mistake, but not in the way I thought, because Crunch crits. I decide to stay in and get one Crunch off myself, taking Floatzel to a third as he responds with another Crunch that actually gets the defense drop this time. So now it's definitely time to switch again, and I go into Brown anticipating another Crunch, but he actually just goes for Aqua Jet. Works for me, and Extreme Speed takes Floatzel out and sends in Rapidash. My Rapidash counters are too damaged to keep going though, but I've got a backup plan in Julia. She switches in on a Fire Blast that does a quarter. At least she uses Power Gem to do over half. Rapidash sets up Sunny Day, but I think so long as Fire Blast doesn't burn, Julia should survive. And it doesn't even crit, so nothing to worry about here as Power Gem kills Rapidash. One Pokemon left. Now, Snorlax is scary, but Ramsey's actually immune to 2 of his attacks, and anticipating an Earthquake, I can swap him in. Now, anticipating a Crunch, I can just go into Brown, and with a Stab, Fist Plate boosted close combat, Snorlax is down and I'm ready for the League. But one thing first. This fight made me realize how ill-equipped my Pokemon are against Heracross and other fighting types. It's increasingly clear to me too that Julia isn't going to be as useful in the League as I'd like, given that I already have good coverage against fire types. So I bring Puck back in instead. This is my final team. Let's see how we do! First up is Aaron. And as much as I love Yanmega, a single Thunderbolt straight up KOs. On Caesar, because of the massive level difference, I can simply swap into Brown, who more or less walls him, and set up 2 Swords Dances. Unfortunately, Ironhead crits, so I can't do another. But with 4 attack boosts and a third of health, Rockslide gets rid of Caesar. Then the Heracross who follows. Drapion comes in next, and I change things up here with a nice close combat, leaving just Vespiquen. And you guessed it, another Rockslide KO for the win! It's time for Bertha now, and I've got another Pokemon who can basically solo this fight. Bibarel cleanly outspeeds Whiscash and Giga Drains for the KO. Then Gliscor comes out. I had a bit of a brain fart and went for Blizzard instead of the superior Ice Shard, resulting in a doubly super effective Fire Fang. but no burn means she survives in the yellow before Blizzard gets rid of Bertha's probably biggest threat. She decides to go for Golem next, and thanks to that, 2 Giga Drains, taking out her and Rhyperior, get back all the health Bibarel lost in the process, and it's just Hippowdon left. I have no idea why Bertha sent her out last when Permanent Sandstorm would have helped her out so much, but with that, I decide to swap into Fury, predicting a Stone Edge. Next, I go back into Bibarel, anticipating a crunch, but Hippowdon goes for Yawn instead. That's fine by me. All I need is one turn, and a now guaranteed stab super effective Icicle Plate boosted Blizzard gets the KO and the win. Just 3 fights left. Now, Flint is always kinda a joke, my team's weakness to fire notwithstanding, and I'm especially lucky that Flay can just outspeed his Houndoom for a clean KO with Surf. This brings Infernape in. Now, I'm not sure if I can outspeed him, so I switch to Fury, who can cleanly come in on a Thunder Punch. After taking a Flare Blitz okay, an Earthquake KOs outright. But now Rapidash is in, and as much as I'd hope otherwise, he outspeeds and sets up Sunny Day. At least Earthquake KOs him, but this is bad because Magmortar, who comes out now, can use a single turn Solar Beam. I need to get rid of the sun, so I swap to Puck to take the Solar Beam before going back to Fury on a Flamethrower, which he survives in the yellow to get Sandstorm back up. Since he can't stay in though, I go into Flay on another Flamethrower. This brings Flay lower than I'd like, but a Mystic Water boosted Surf gets rid of Magmortar cleanly. This just leaves Flareon. I Surf him, but he survives on a Sliver, and uses Overheat. And even though Flay survives it, this is his last turn. Sandstorm Chip makes it so that at just 7 HP, Flay just got beat. As a result, this is a Pyrrhic win, and I've got to face the last 2 battles with just 5 Pokemon. Lucario in particular is hard. I was really hoping to have Flay for this fight because of his access to Crunch, but I'm gonna have to improvise. I lead with Fury. Here, I yawn Mr. Mime as he sets up Light Screen. Then, I swap in Brown as Mr. Mime goes for a Reflect before falling asleep. And with that, I set up Swords Dance once, twice, 3 times, before using Shadow Claw, which atop Brown for this fight to KO right before Reflect ends. And that should make every one of Lucian's Pokemon a one-shot. So now I get to sweeping. A Shadow Claw gets rid of Gallade, then Alaka... He outspeeds? I just nearly had a heart attack, but Brown survives on a Sliver to take Alakazam out. Lucian sends out Bronzong, and Brown's still probably my best bet here, so with the close combat, they're in the ground, leaving just Espeon. And here's where the sweep ends. Because he has Quick Attack, I'm not staying in. I pop into Puck, who takes Quick Attack for basically nothing. Shadow Ball hits off a quarter as a Shadow Ball of his own responds to do over half. And with one more back and forth, I just beat the Elite Four. All that stands in my way is one of the hardest champions in Pokemon history. Cynthia is tough, absolutely no way around it. She's got impressive coverage, and very little is guaranteed for this fight. After using rare candies to get to the cap, I head in. Let's see what we can cook up! I lead with Fury. He outspeeds Spiritomb for a yawn before she uses Dark Pulse. But now, I can swap into Brown on another before Spiritomb falls asleep. None of Spiritomb's attacks can even 3-hit, so this is safe. I begin my setup, going for Swords Dance 3 times as Spiritomb stays asleep. Not that it matters. But once Brown is at max attack, I Earthquake Spiritomb into the ground. Cynthia sends out Lucario, who I admittedly kind of forgot about, but an Earthquake gets rid of him pretty easily. And then she sends out Garchomp. I wasn't expecting her so early, and that's terrifying. But this sweep feels like my best bet. I click Extreme Speed. This is a risk because of Sandveil, but Brown connects, and with a max-powered Extreme Speed, Garchomp survives? No! No! That's devastating! With Brown down, I'm really worried about my chances now. But Brown gives us a gift here. Now, I can switch in Bibarel, and thanks to Extreme Speed activating Garchomp's Citrus Berry, Ice Shard is a guaranteed KO, especially without Sandstorm. This brings in Togekiss, and predicting a Focus Blast, I swap to Ramsey. It's actually an Air Slash, but not too bad. And now, a Thunderbolt does over half. Ramsey has to tank a Water Pulse in the process, but does so like a champ. And one more brings in Milotic. But sadly, here's Ramsey's time to go. With a Thunderbolt, Milotic gets sent to half before a Surf takes them out. Rest well, buddy. Thunderbolt paralyzes too, activating Marvel Scale. But even if Woodhammer's nerfed, Bibarel's the best choice here as a Giga Drain can keep Milotic alive on a sliver. Bibarel tanks Ice Beam pretty well, but that's certainly not ideal. At least the Hail can take her out, leaving just Roserade left. I decide to go for Blizzard, but she outspeeds and Sludge Bomb KOs Bibarel! I'm so sorry, that was a really dumb mistake. But Bibarel's death lets me cleanly go into Puck, and my last minute addition to the team is now my best chance against Roserade. Energy Ball does a 6th as an extra sensory brings her to the red. But now, Cynthia's forced to heal, and one more extra sensory brings Roserade right back, letting a final one KO for the win. I just beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Platinum, banning half the Pokédex. And that run was a blast. Pokemon Platinum is such a great game, and it's really the first game where Pokemon get super interesting movesets, and that made things so fun. This was a blast of a Nuzlocke for problem solving, starting with all the encounters I had to sort out around Eterna City, and ending with navigating teams with increased ranges of coverage like my rivals and Cynthia's. And pretty much every Pokemon I used served a pivotal role, whether it was Badoo sweeping Rourke or Bronzong serving as a tanky backup in the lead. Brown the Lucario was definitely the MVP of the run, but I couldn't have gotten this far without any of the rest of my Pokemon either. It was a real team effort, and that's a wrap. Please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any suggestions or things you'd like to see me do, leave a comment, at me on Twitter, or email me with your suggestion at ed40plays@gmail.com. Next up, we're gonna do a challenge I've been excited about for the last year. Catch you all there.